Welcome to the Tradie Wife Life podcast, brought to you by Tradies in Business, where we talk to tradie wives about their goals, their challenges, their hopes and dreams, and how their trade business can help with that. We're back with another episode where we share some polarizing opinions in opposite directions for another She Says, He Says episode. Hello, Warwick Bidwell.
Hello, Nicola Cox.
I can't make my microphone go the way I want it to go, so it's just going to have to be in my face. I like these episodes because even though we're not a couple in business, I kind of feel like we have a relationship and we're in business, given that we work together all day, every day. I see more of you than I see of my own family and vice versa. And I don't know, sometimes some of these issues you and I might trip over as well, just a little bit.
That's why I'm a little apprehensive about recording this episode.
Well, today we're going to talk about who should make the decision in a business. And our lovely Sophie, I want to give a shout out to our lovely Sophie. We put the challenge to Sophie, who is a tradie wife also, to come up with some topic ideas for us, because Warwick and I think we know what everybody wants to hear from us. And, you know, over on Tradies in Business, we have more than 650 episodes of the podcast. So we've really talked about everything many times over. We're trying to do something a little bit different here at Tradie Wife Life. And so therefore, I don't always feel like I'm the best qualified to figure out what to talk about. She's come up with this concept today. So I just want to say thanks, Soph, for dropping us in it and making it a really challenging one for us to navigate our way through.
And as a segue, Nick, which I do over at Tradies in Business, you said we think we know what the listeners want to hear about. I actually don't know, but someone's got to make a decision about what we're going to talk about. I just don't know who should make that decision.
Today we're talking about taking charge or making a decision and how to do it and navigate through that in a relationship and business. It's one of those things that we do see many couples fall into conflict over, particularly in the beginning of navigating what working together might look like. Because let's face it, most journeys in a trade business start with the wife coming in just to help, just to do the books, just to help out with social media, just to stop the overwhelm, and generally turn into new careers, fantastic business opportunities, some fun together, having that lifestyle that you're looking towards. And yet there seems to be a lot of bumps on the way to navigate your way through. And this is one of the big ones, how to make decisions and whose role is it anyway? And I don't know that we have a perfect answer. I just think we have some experience that we can share, and maybe that will help drive an answer that works for you and your business.
I'm being very quiet and I'm grinning very, very broadly. It is a tough one, Nick. And look, I was never a tradie. I always wanted to be, but I sit in a different role now, obviously, working with tradespeople. And I do come from a trade family, as we talk about. So, and I've worked with my life partner before, my ex-wife. We worked somewhat together in a business, but it was largely her business, and I was just sort of there as the support person. So it was kind of a role reversal. And yeah, there was not even so much conflict, but perhaps uncertainty and apprehension around, well, who was going to make the final call? Because ultimately, like you and I in Tradies in Business, as business partners, you referenced this so well before, Nick, one of us has to make a decision. And it's ridiculous that we would both discuss every single little thing in business and somehow reach mutual agreement. Like, that's just not reality.
No.
There's times where you and I don't agree on stuff, and it's unfortunately easy for either one of us to go, oh, we'll just do what you think then. Mm-hmm. And that just becomes this horrendous, backhanded, loaded dismissal of, oh, that's fine, whatever you think.
Mm.
And then, and not that you and I do that. Well, I don't think we've ever done that. We disagree on stuff.
Sure.
But I think ultimately, that I'm the one that makes all the decisions. So that just works nicely.
That was sly. I think I think that because we've chosen not to work with our life partners and working you and I together as friends, it's created a different dynamic from the beginning. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't slip into some of the same issues that you potentially face when working with a partner as our friendship deepens and we're more familiar with one another. And that can create the same lazy habits. That's essentially what they are. They're lazy habits. And it could definitely create an opportunity for us to do some of those things, and consciously we've never allowed it. And I can't even think of a time when we've needed to do this, but I know I have your permission if that came up in one of our conversations to be able to say that that's not okay, and we're not going to make a decision that way. We're going to continue to respect one another and find the solution that's right for the business. Because I think this is the big lesson, or the big opportunity I'd like to get across today. Making a decision isn't necessarily around one person or the other making a decision. It's about everybody being satisfied that it's the right thing for the business, or it's the right outcome for the client, or it's the right outcome for the business and the client, or for the team member, or for the relationship, rather than it being about one person or the other making a choice. And I think that's the real point of difference. And I don't know but they're not skills that we're necessarily taught unless you do some of the study and work that you and I have had the opportunity to do. You don't necessarily trip over these things. We refer to it in our teachings as the triangle of possibility. Used to be my very favorite teaching for a really long time, because I got to do the little triangle shape with my fingers, and it made me feel like, I was demonstrating.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
But it's one of those principles that when you make a choice to live by that principle and you deeply live by that principle, it is a life-changing principle to follow and adopt and firmly be a part of.
I actually think this whole thing of who's the boss doesn't really speak to my opinion that no one needs to be the boss. That whole idea and this power struggle between, well, whose business is it? It's like, it's our business. That's easier for you and I because we are literally business partners. There's a piece of paper that says how much you own and how much I own, and it is exactly 50-50. So we have legal equity. There's an equitable relationship. But you and I bring different things to the table, different skills, different perspectives, different constraints, different emotions, and they always play out in our decision making. But at the end of the day, I don't need to stamp my authority on any part of this business to feel like a complete man. And I know you don't, well, I hope you don't need to stamp your authority, Nick, to feel like enough of a woman or enough of a business owner. And I reckon that's where a lot of the problems come in. People won't generally admit that that's what's going on. But where I see, particularly husbands and wives, if we just talk about that stereotypical relationship and a business partnership and life partnership that's all mixed up together, unfortunately, I think there's this power play that's silently going on in the background that's driven by emotion and ego, that means that when he says, oh, well, I've already decided this is what we're doing, she feels like, I'm sure the listeners can straight away conjure up those feelings, Nick, because they've probably felt them before. Feels less than, disrespected, unappreciated, not heard, not seen, all that stuff. And you need to be able to separate those two, because they don't have to be related.
Mm-hmm.
And if your worth as a partner and as a business person and as a member of the business, if your worth is attached to whether you make decisions or not, then you're going to have some serious problems.
I think that some of this goes through to boundary setting, and there's a great opportunity when you're working together to have position descriptions. Sounds like a ridiculous thing to have to do in a partnership, and yet they're incredibly important. So for you and I, for example, there's a bunch of things that we always discuss. We don't make individual decisions on, specifically money things you and I discuss. And again, that's much easier for us because we're not romantically involved and it doesn't bring up a whole lot of other stuff. And we still have to work at that to make sure we can make the correct decisions for our business there. There are some procedural things, staff things, client things. We always make decisions together on those things. And yet there are a set of responsibilities that you and I both have with our position descriptions that mean you trust me to make decisions on A, B, and C, and I trust you to make decisions on A, B, and C. And we don't necessarily have to, if you ask me the question, I'd obviously explain what my decision was based in, and likewise, and I trust that you've made it for the right reason for the business. And that's it. I think that's the point here, because we bring so much of the relationship stuff into a business. We tend to allow that to cloud how we feel about the decisions. And suddenly there's a contentious point instead of it just being a decision. And that's really hard to stop. That emotional stuff's very hard to stop. I want to acknowledge that we're making it sound simple, and it's not. It's hard. And this is one of those choose your hard situations. Is it harder to fight all the time, or to feel unappreciated and undervalued and frustrated because she's picking at my decisions? Or is it harder to come up with a set of boundaries that works for you guys and then stick to it? Sure, it's still going to trigger some stuff for you as a couple. And putting the boundaries in place makes it much easier to at least lean into what your superpowers are. So you mentioned earlier that we each have some constraints. We do. And we use those constraints to our advantage. I don't ever have to make a decision on tech ever. It's brilliant. It doesn't bother me at all, because I know you're going to make the right decisions for us and our company and for our clients as well. I don't need to be bothered by any of that. I can leave that in your very capable hands. I would suggest 9 times out of 10, the operations of the business largely could be left to the tradie. They know what they're doing. They know how to build a house, or they know how to plumb the house, or whatever it is that they're doing in their trade. I don't need to be involved in those kinds of decisions, but I might be involved in the decisions around the staff, or I might be involved in the decisions around, or I might create all of the decisions around how we market the business and who we market it to. We might come together for the financial stuff. But I think it's important with those boundaries that you then don't, you've got to be very mindful of who you are within those boundaries and don't overstep them, which is very simple to do when you're in a romantic relationship. You feel as though you have ownership over the other person's decisions, and that's not necessarily okay.
I see a lot of couples who scrutinize each other's actions, and that to me indicates a lack of trust and a lack of, like you're saying, Nick, clarity around the roles. What am I going to agree that you're responsible for, and what are you going to agree that I'm responsible for, and what are we both going to agree that we will jointly attack? Because, and you said something interesting, Nick, which I want to rewind a second here and pick up on. You said you trust me to make the tech decisions for our business, and because you know that I'm going to get it right, and I'm going to get it right for our clients.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't always, and that's the point I want to make. Sometimes I get it wrong, and that doesn't matter, right? Unless I make some catastrophic mistake and waste, 6 months of our revenue on a tech decision. Even then, that's my responsibility. That's part of my role. And part of your role in that is to accept that that was an agreement we made, and you need to be okay with that mistake.
That's right.
Now, that can be a really, really tough pill to swallow, particularly when money's involved, or particularly when, as I said before, our personal worth strays into those interactions. And so it's as you said, Nick, it's not easy. Nothing good is easy. And so, but you have to make a commitment to do it differently to how you've been doing it if it's not working for you. If you're not happy with the dynamic between yourself and your partner, then you need to change something. And one of the simplest changes is to allow each other the space to make decisions that are in your wheelhouse and not poke your freaking nose in.
I don't know how many discussions I've had in the last 6 years with tradie wives who are frustrated because their tradies won't listen to them and they know best. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that you don't know best. I'm suggesting that the harder we push into areas specifically within their trade where, let's face it, there are times when every tradie approaches something and it could be approached differently that might create a better outcome for them. But they've got to find it for themselves. And this is a really hard conversation to balance with a frustrated tradie wife, because I hear your frustration. I've been there. I really, really get it. And yet the more we insert ourselves into areas that we shouldn't, the more the tradie actually pushes against us and keeps digging into what could be solved with a bit of space and some balanced discussions. Now, that's really hard when you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose this client, or oh my goodness, there goes our profit, or holy moly, we're going to lose the team member. But sometimes we all need to fall on our own swords for us to be motivated to make a change, because we don't change simply out of want. We change because the pain of staying the same is so great that the pain of the change is less. And so then we will make that change. And sometimes it's quite simply because we don't understand another way. And we do see that a lot in the trade space, because unfortunately tradies aren't educated through their apprenticeships on how to run a business. And there aren't a bunch of business courses that are easy to access and easy in plain language speaking to be able to then go and consume after. Often they don't know another way, and that's okay. There are professionals that can get involved and help you, or there are things like this podcast or the Tradies and Business podcast that you could share that can start to open up the eyes for another way. And it's okay to have balanced discussions where we throw up a bunch of possibilities, but then you've got to get out of the way and allow them to make that choice. And I think that's the key to reducing your frustration around being a tradie wife and the way your business is currently being run. If I look at our extended client base over the last 6 years, we've had some very, very frustrated wives. And when we empower them to get out of the way and understand that that's the choice that the tradie is making, that's the choice they're going to continue to make until they feel confident enough to make a different one or motivated enough to make a different one, it's amazing how quickly the change actually comes about when they get out of the way. And so I feel like I've poked a bunch of ladies in the chest, because this is a really common discussion that we see around the trade space. And yet I really want to encourage you to look at how we might be getting in the way at times. And is there an opportunity for you to jump out of the way and allow them to find their own answers, their own solutions, because they got to where they are on their own volition, finding their own answers and their own solutions. Sure, it might not be where you want it to be, but it doesn't mean that they can't make the change that's necessary to go where you want to go.
Mm. Yeah, this is not an episode about nagging, but I love what Maggie Dent, but I'm going to talk about it. I love what Maggie Dent says about this, particularly with raising boys, teenage boys and men, because really we're just a bunch of boys with deeper voices. And that is that the more often you say something to a male, the less he's able to hear it, because we tune it out.
Mm-hmm.
We're just wired to do that. We're wired to tune out noise. And so it is counterproductive to keep pecking away at this thing of like, you're not charging enough, you've lost money on another job. The more you say that, the more shit he feels, and the less he's actually going to be feeling inspired to change it, because he feels like an idiot and a failure, and he's going to push back harder, which doesn't make any sense to a woman. So, as you say, Nick, just taking the pressure off and finding other ways to approach that, so that the price change becomes a decision of the man. So he's the boss of his own destiny in that sense. But he got there on his own, and then he's going to take more ownership of that choice. So that has to come from a different conversation around, making some agreements to perhaps look at the profit figure on a monthly basis, not actually talk specifically about how you stuffed this job up and lost us money.
Yeah.
So I think the fabulous thing for the tradie wives is that they're able to consider more than one thing at a time. Whereas we see with the blokes, they have a very singular focus. I just got to get this job done. I just want to finish this job, get off this job, and then we can start the next one. And until they finish that job, they literally just can't even think of anything else. They can barely think about even eating or showering. Like, they just want to finish this job. And so you both need to make mutual agreements that, you're going to sit down and review things. So perhaps introducing a different way to highlight what could be changed.
I did a fantastic episode a while back. I'm just trying to look for the episode number. I can't find it, with Megs Dixon, about
Mm.
how men are like racehorses. And it's so incredibly true. And I think the point I would really like to make here is, at some point we need to acknowledge that we are different. Men and women are different. We think different. We communicate differently.
Hang on. So men are like racehorses. Why? Because we need a woman riding our back and flogging us to get us to the line?
No, but there'd be plenty of fellas that would think that was okay. No, they're like racehorses, because you actually taught me this lesson about horses. I didn't know this. I knew it about men, didn't know it about horses. Sometimes you need to pull away from the pressure to invite open and create the space for them to step towards the thing that you want them to step towards. But when we're trying to push somebody in, so like imagine trying to get a horse into a horse float. And please don't come at me if you're a horse person. I know nothing much about horses other than this pressure concept. Taking away the pressure can make it more attractive for them to get into the horse float, instead of ordinarily, when I think about it with a dog, you're trying to push and cajole that dog into the space. They're fine with it because they're dogs and they're wired differently. A horse does not want to go in the horse float unless you get out of the way and they think, oh, this is attractive now, I want to go in. Our fellas are very, very much the same. And we talk about that a lot at length in that episode. It's definitely worth going back to find it. Because I think when, it's 2024, look, I'm a middle-aged lady, so I probably say a lot of things still that aren't PC. And I think that they deserve some consideration. And there's some stereotypical norms here that can be unspoken these days because of some of those quote unquote PC things to talk about. And yet they're so incredibly true. And if we just embrace them, Maggie brings with her many more years of experience and that amazing time of your life where you can say whatever you want because it's true and it's okay to say it and nobody's going to push back on you. I'm not quite that brave yet. And yet everything she says is true about the differences between men and women. Your fellas have a one-track mind. They're thinking about one thing, and generally it's about getting the job done. And then we spoke to another man this morning who was absolutely heartbroken at the fact that his previous business had cost him his marriage. He was absolutely heartbroken. He's been blessed to find a new partner, and the new partner has a child, and together they're trying to make a go of it as a family. And I can see the strain and the exhaustion on his face when he's talking about finding a way to balance creating a business without working himself into the ground. And I don't think as ladies we understand what our mental loads are. We understand what we're carrying every day. And I think we forget that they're also carrying a bunch and worrying about a bunch. And their stuff is very different to ours, and it's just as catastrophic as our loads are. And I think sometimes we've just got to get out of the way, take a look back and understand, yep, there are some differences between us and that's okay. And there's a way we can all work within it. And it truly starts with something as simple as a position description within your company. So you can both take responsibilities for some areas in the business where you have a strength and the other may have a constraint. And even if they don't have a constraint, you have a strength. And that's where it starts. And then some good, clear, open communication, trying not to be triggered emotionally can make a huge difference to getting your point across. Not easy to do, I recognize. And it can make a huge difference to being heard.
This is usually where I come in and have the last say, because that makes me feel like I'm, enough of a man and I'm the boss, Nick. Just to go back to that boss principle, I reckon there could be a simple way for people to change their thinking around this, particularly the ladies, I guess, because that's, tends to be who's listening to these episodes, is getting clarity on what you are the boss of, not who. We think about being the boss as we're the boss, so we sit above all the other people. That's how it's commonly conceptualized. But it's actually, what are you the boss of? Are you the boss of finance? Are you the boss of marketing? And so those areas are where you get to make decisions, but nobody is the boss of you, and you're not the boss of any other person. And ultimately, our bosses, yours and my boss as business partners, is the business.
Yes.
Because it needs to actually thrive for you and I to achieve our personal goals, Nick. And it's the same in, my wife's business. Her business is our boss. And so the decisions that are made are actually for the benefit of the business, because that means we get looked after. I think just shifting the thinking around a boss being a boss of people and more a boss being a boss of things could help to get rid of some of this emotional tension and power struggles and everything that goes on.
It's an excellent distinction. And I love that because this is my podcast, I get the last word.
And I'm going to be respectful and sit back here and shut up.
You are very good at being respectful. Listeners, I hope there was some value in today's episode. It can be very challenging to navigate romantic relationships and work relationships. It's not something that we're strangers to. And we have a fantastic supportive Facebook community if you would like to lean into getting some support for you as you navigate your way through those early struggles in business. You can find us over on Facebook at Tradie Wife Life and Tradie Wife Life Podcast. So there's a group and then there is a page. And you can also, I believe, these days send us a message through Spotify if you're listening over on Spotify. Otherwise, you can find us at tradiesandbusiness.com.au. And thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.